Welcome to this video about microphones. So in this video I will explain to you the two main types of microphone, which are dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. And I'll also talk to you about different microphone characteristics and where to use which microphone in practice. So let's jump right into it. A dynamic microphone, maybe you've heard a lot about it, but you never really understood like what is it in detail and how does it work. So I try to give you a little bit of an overview here, how it actually works. To fully understand it, you would need a lot of knowledge in electricity, specifically in induction, like in electrical induction. So I just give you here an overview and hope you can just understand the idea behind. So what we see here is basically the head of a microphone. So let me quickly do a drawing here. So that should be a microphone. So basically what we see on the slide is this part of the microphone, the head, and the person who sings the vocal, he sings into the microphone from this direction. So in this microphone head we do have a few things. We do have a coil, which is depicted here. So like a little wire winded around a magnet. So in the middle of this coil there is a magnet, but this magnet is basically it's floating inside this coil, so it's not fixed, but this magnet can move, which is pretty important. So this coil is basically fixed on a coil tray or on a coil hanger or something. So it's fixed there, and in between or inside this coil there is this magnet. So at the very beginning, where the voice is coming in, there is a little membrane, and this membrane starts moving when the vocal starts to sing. And through the movement of the membrane, the magnet starts moving within this coil. So depending on the sound which is coming from the vocal, the magnet moves back and forth differently. And through this back and forth movement of the magnet, there is a current, an electrical current induced within this coil. So basically this movement of the magnet induces an electrical current. And this is now the point where you would have to know a lot of things about electricity to really understand why this happens. But the cool thing about this is that this electrical signal we can then send to the mixing console, and we can work with it, like mix it and basically send the electrical signal further to the speaker to get the sound on the speakers, which is pretty cool. So in the end it's literally just a magnet moving through a coil indicating an electrical current, and this electrical current, the type of this signal is basically the signal we work with in the mixing console. So on the right side here you can see a little graph, and this graph basically depicts how the microphone, this case SM58, it's probably the most common dynamic microphone we use, the Shure SM58, how it responds to different frequency levels. So we see it's not linear. So we have here the frequencies 20 to 20,000. Sorry for that blurry image. So you might probably not be able to read this, but that's the frequency range 20 to 20,000. And we see here that it reacts much faster to lower frequencies in the range 40 to approximately 100, 150. And we can see that it reacts to higher frequencies in the range over 1 kilohertz much less. So there is like a little bit too much lows for SM58 or for dynamic microphones in general. That's actually also the main difference to condenser mics. Then when we look at the same graph for condenser mics, we see the response to the signal which is coming in is much more linear. So actually this is what we anticipate for. This is exactly what we want. So a condenser mic is much more accurate, and it picks up the lower frequencies almost the same as it picks up the higher frequencies. Now the question arises, like, what is actually a condenser microphone? So I'm going to explain that. What is the difference to a dynamic microphone? So in a condenser microphone, we do have, again, the head of the microphone here. The vocal is singing into the microphone from this direction. And this microphone now is a completely different idea, basically. So in this microphone there is also another little membrane. It's a little metal plate, and then there is a second metal plate. And this second metal plate, there is basically, basically there is like there is power sent to these two electrical plates, and then there is a difference in power between the two plates. So there is a different, a difference in power between the two plates. And now what is happening, that the thing is, and also here there would be again some electrical knowledge be needed. The interesting thing is that the difference in power on these two plates depends on the gap between the two plates. So whenever this gap is changed, the difference in power changes too. So what is happening when someone is singing into the mic, the membrane, this membrane here, starts to move a little bit, and through that movement the gap between the two plates changes, and this is also how the difference in power, in electrical power, changes here. And these changes of power differences, we again use as our electrical signal, basically, to do mixing in the mixing console. So this changes in power difference is then transformed to our final, like, electrical signal we want to have in the mixing console, and which we work with. So that's the main functionality, like how the condenser mic works. And this is now also exactly the reason why condenser mics need additional power. I mean, I just explained that we have to send this electrical power to the two metal plates. Without sending additional power to these plates, which generate this power difference, the microphone would not work. And this is the reason why you always have to switch on phantom power. You've probably seen that, that's existing on every mixing console. This is exactly the reason why you do have to switch on phantom power for condenser mics, but you don't have to switch on phantom power for dynamic mics, because when we again look at the dynamic mic, there is no additional power needed. The power itself is generated while this magnet is moving in the coil, and this way the electrical signal is basically produced on its own, whereas on the condenser mic we first need the power to have this power difference between the two metal plates, and just then we basically can use the microphone and change this difference in power by moving this membrane back and forth through singing or through speaking. So I hope you can always remember that in condenser mics we do need this additional power we have to send to the microphone. And please try to remember also that this is called phantom power. It's basically just one setting you can normally take per channel in all the modern mixing consoles, and they basically then send this electrical power through the signal cable, through the XLR cable you normally connect the microphone to the console with, and they send it through this cable. It is sent to the microphone, and this is in the end how it works. So just another few facts about condenser microphones. I maybe said a few of them already. So first one, the microphone capsule is more sensitive than the one of dynamic microphones. That's true. In condenser mics, you can basically destroy it faster than dynamic microphones. Dynamic microphones are much more robust, so they can also sustain higher sound pressure levels, whereas condenser mics, they break faster. And this is also why most of these microphones do have a gain which is number 3 here. Condenser mics mostly have an additional gain knob so that you can turn the gain down when you use it for louder signals. I already mentioned that one. You need additional power for the condenser mic, which is called phantom power. And then the question now arises, like, where do we use condenser mics and where do we use dynamic mics? And I mentioned before that dynamics mics are not as accurate as condenser mics because they do have like a little bit more response in the like in the low frequency area and a little bit less in the high heights. And I mean, it's not a very severe thing here, but still I would recommend for like good vocals to consider using condenser mics because they're more brilliant, they're more accurate and more linear in the sound they produce. So for a good vocal I would recommend to use condenser mics. Also for choirs and also for like instruments which use which have very high frequencies, like hi-hats and overheads. We also almost always use condenser mics. So basically every place, everywhere where a detailed capture of the sound is necessary. Now, next I would like to talk about one special microphone, and this special microphone is called boundary microphone, or PZM for pressure zone microphone. And this microphone, normally, like in normal setups, we see it at exactly one place, and this is inside the kick drum. So this microphone is basically, it's a condenser mic too, and I think mostly it's a condenser mic, and it got like several advantages compared to other microphones like SM58 and so on. And these advantages is that first, it is not very sensitive to the comb filter effect. If you don't know what the comb filter effect is, probably switch back to Unit 1 quickly and watch the last video there. Because it's like on a boundary zone, like it's normally on the floor or in the kick drum, on the floor of the kick drum. There is not much possibilities to have like reflected sounds entering the microphones from the floor or the wall because it's already on the floor, so there's not a lot of reflections coming in, which is a big advantage in terms of comb filter effect. We also get the additional good thing that there is a plus 6 dB sensitivity this way, because it's because as it is like on the floor, we like gain 6 dBs. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure anymore why, but that's the case here. So we'll get higher response than when the microphone is just somewhere in the room. And yeah, most uses, as I said already, is bass drum. Sometimes you can put it, you can also put it into a concert piano. So that's another location it's used often. Or a third one would be in a theater. So if the people cannot wear headsets, it was also already used sometimes to just place it on a table, let's say. When the people in the theater sit around the table, the audience cannot really see the mic because it's so flat, but still it can catch all the speaking. So that's another point where you could use the PZM, the boundary microphone. So that was just a quick explanation about this one, not very detailed, but just to let you know this exists and you could use it. If you mix bands, always consider using it for inside the kick drum. Alright, so now next thing we are talking about polar pattern or directionalities. So there is every microphone basically has a polar pattern, and you should know about which different polar patterns exist. And for the microphones you use, you should know which polar pattern does the microphone I currently use have, and which polar pattern it has, and is it suitable for the location I want to use it at. So I first go through this different polar pattern and then tell you, and then I will always tell you for each polar pattern like at which place it would make sense to use it. So the first polar pattern is called omnidirectional. Omni, as the word already says, it picks the sound from all directions. So no matter where you stand. You can sing in the microphone from here, you can also sing in from the back. It will always capture your voice and yeah, send it to the mixer. So this omnidirectional polar pattern is pretty cool if the vocal or whoever uses the mic cannot sing like always in front of the mic. Also sometimes it's cool if more than one person wants to sing into the mic, so maybe you have a second one singing into the mic from the side or from the back, and this mic can be used for that because it captures the sound from all directions. One very big disadvantage of this one is that there can be a lot of feedback. So as the microphone takes the sound from all directionalities, there will be basically coming in much of noise also, and it can fast happen that, especially if you use like floor wedges for monitoring, it can happen fast that there is a feedback loop, that some sound goes out of the speaker again back into the back side of the microphone, and then you have that feedback loop. The good thing about this is that the sound is really neutral, and this microphone sounds really natural and really like it's really linear, like the sound it gets. So this is pretty cool, very natural sound. As I mentioned already, the disadvantages is the feedback loops you get. So you should always consider that. Normally we don't use it really for vocals, we use microphones with a different polar pattern. So that's basically probably the one we use most for vocals. It's called cardioid. So the cardioid type of polar pattern takes sound from the front the most. So if you sing into the mic, like straight into the mic from the front, the sound is captured the best. Whenever you start to sing into the microphone a little bit more from the side, the sound is not captured as good anymore as from the front. And when you sing into the mic from the back, the sound is almost not captured at all anymore. So yeah, one thing to know here is like this microphone is much better for in terms of feedback loops. So as there is not really a lot of sound captured from the back, it doesn't generate feedback loop as fast as the omnidirectional pattern. One interesting thing about this mic is like one effect which often happens is that cardioid polar patterns, they tend to like have a little bit too heavy or too much volume in the lower frequency areas, in the bass frequency areas, especially when you go close to the mic when singing. The bass frequencies, the low frequencies, start to go up higher than the low mids, high mids and high frequencies. That's one thing to consider with this mic. And of course, as soon as you go to the side, like if you sing into the microphone from the side, it will at first sound like the signal will be weaker. That's the first thing. And the second thing is the signal it gets won't also be as linear anymore as when you sing in from the front. So yeah, basically the sound changes, like the way the sound sounds changes when you start to sing into the microphone a little bit from the side, which is definitely a disadvantage of this microphone. But else, I really do like this microphone. I use it a lot, and I use it almost always for vocals and different kinds of instruments also. So yeah, I think the most important thing maybe here is tell your vocals that they have to sing in from the front and not from the side to get this natural, good quality, high pressure sound. There is actually two more similar patterns to the cardioid, and this is the supercardioid and the hypercardioid. So it's basically the same polar pattern with the almost same properties. You got the best sound when you're singing from the front. You don't really have good sound when you're singing from the side. However, it's interesting that there is again again picking some sound when you when coming from the back, which is basically an effect we have here, but we don't want it. So like this cardioid here compared to the cardioid, like the cardioid here compared to the supercardioid, it's much more, it's flatter, like it's much more directed, let's say. So when you're singing from the side, the sound is much weaker than when you sing in here from the side. So here you still get a little bit of sound coming in. However, when you sing in here from the side, the sound is much less, but the disadvantage is from the back. Again, you get some sound. So when you use this mic at the location where you know there is a lot of sound coming from the side, you can consider using it. However, when you know there is sound coming from the back, you rather go for cardioid and not supercardioid. And the hypercardioid is basically the exact same thing as the supercardioid. The effects are just much stronger, so it's much more directed than supercardioid, and therefore it also has a much more pickup at the back than the supercardioid. So it's really thin, like the cardio is really thin, maybe one thing you can always remember when you use this mic for vocals is that when you have a floor wedge to do monitoring, don't put the wedge in front of the person singing, but put it to the side to eliminate the feedback loop. This is especially important for the supercardioid mics. So whenever you use supercardioid mics, try to put the floor wedge on the side of the person and not in front of her, to get rid of this effect of taking up the feedback here. So yeah, I think the one big advantage is really that it is really isolated, in a nice way. It's isolating in a nice way the sounds coming from the side. This is definitely a really big advantage, and it picks up the sound from coming from the front really clean and pure. However, the disadvantage we also had with the cardioid already, that when you go closer to the mic, that the bass frequencies, the low frequencies will go higher. We also have with this one, and it's actually even worse than with cardioid. So that's one advantage you should pay attention to. I mean, you just have to fix these things then, or you have to pay attention to when you also do the mixing, to make sure you can handle this in the mixing console. And of course, the biggest advantage probably that we get, that it picks up the sound from the back also. And of course, one last big disadvantage is that whenever you start singing in from the side, it will sound different. I mean, of course, the volume goes down, the gain goes down, but it also sounds different. So the sound changes much more than it changes when you're singing from the side on a cardioid type of mic. So that was supercardioid and hypercardioid. There is several places where we also use this one. I think especially in the drum, this is sometimes quite useful. For vocals, I definitely use more cardioid than supercardioid. However, there is places also where you can use supercardioid for vocals. Then the last one is the bidirectional one. It's probably a really rare type of polar pattern. We don't use it often, but basically this microphone picks up sound from two sides. So you have one pickup here and one pickup here. To be honest, I'm probably never used it before, but I think it's a nice microphone to use it if you want to have to get some kind of stereo effect. Sometimes you want to do special recordings in studios where you need these stereo effects or sound coming from different sides or different sources. Then this is also very interesting to use. However, you need to be always aware that, especially with this microphone, you will get immediately feedback loops because it's picking up the sound from various sides. So yeah, be aware of that there is much faster feedback coming in. So advantage of this one, as we are talking here about live mixing and not studio recordings, probably not a lot, so I would not recommend to use this in like live settings. Probably it literally got more disadvantages here for live usage. I mean, yeah, a lot of feedback loops arise pretty fast, and also the effect we talked about before already for the cardioid mics, that when you go closer to the mic, that you get a higher bass frequency response. This also we have with this microphone. So that's basically it. That was the most important polar pattern. So just try to remember there was also always a little sign to each image how this polar pattern looks like, and normally this sign you can also find on the mic or on the mic case. And yeah, always try to think about, how do I use this mic? Where is my sound coming from? Is it coming from the side also? And do I want the mic to pick up the sound from the side? If yes, consider using cardioid or probably omnidirectional. If no, go rather for cardioid or probably super or hyper cardioid. If you know there is a lot of possibilities to get feedback loops, make sure you don't use super or hypercardioid, and of course not omnidirectional. So rather go for cardioid when you know there is a lot of possibilities to get feedback loops, like with floor wedges or so. Alright, so that was it for me at this moment. We will later talk about where can you use which mic and how do you set up the mics, especially in drums. See you in the next video.